So this happened about 4 months ago now. Maybe more, but I don't really know for sure. Anyway, I was 19 years old. I've turned 20 by now, mid-February, and was going home from university after classes. I usually take my keys with me, but around that time I had lost them, and my mom was yet to get me a new copy. I remember I kept insisting, but she wouldn't listen. So what I did was knock on the door to get my younger brother's attention so he'd come and let me in, but my mom also took his keys and just left him there locked up as well. I asked my brother to pass me my charger from my room, and I called one of my aunties to see if I could go hang out at her workplace in the meantime. She said yes and then told me to call an Uber that she'd be paying for as soon as I got there, and that's what I did. Now, the Uber didn't pick me up exactly at home. It was in the house across the street instead. No special reason. It just did. The moment I saw the guy, he gave me kind of a weird vibe, but I also tend to be paranoid every time I so much as hop on a taxi, so I just got in, rolled down the window, and kept a grip on both of my phones. It all seemed relatively normal until we got to the area where my aunt's workplace was. This was a convenience store at her home in a housing, I think that's what you call it, when there's like a private division, I don't know, but condominium didn't sound right. He just completely drove past it and claimed he was following the GPS when I asked him about it. But he wouldn't let me see the GPS. He seemed to know exactly where he wanted to go, and now I was kinda doomed from the beginning because I didn't know directions, and I could only rely on the driver being a decent person and recognizing the area, which I did, but wherever he was taking me, I had no idea. I remember seeing this fountain that I could recognize from when my mom drove to my uncle's place, but that was like way further away from my aunt's place. By now I was kind of thinking, what do I do, because this guy drove past a ton of empty housings, and a couple of them even seemed to still be under construction. Then he stopped near a place that looked like the end of civilization. We were literally on a hill, and he turned off the car. I got lucky in so many ways, looking back on it. My phone had no credit. As soon as I thought of that, my aunt called me and said, "Where are you?" And I literally felt my heart drop because I had no idea, and this dude was just staring at me. I said I didn't know and asked him, "Hey, where did you take me?" And he replied with, "I wouldn't know what to tell you, kid." That was enough for me. I grabbed my backpack and opened the door real quick with a loud, "That's fine, I'll see myself out," and hauled ass like I hadn't in a very long time. I remember even being afraid of carrying my backpack on the back in case he'd chase me and pull on it. So I was holding it in my hand with my hoodie wrapped around my waist, and I thought of where to hide. I thought of knocking on someone's door, but for some reason that didn't seem safe to me at the moment. I remember telling my aunt not to hang up because he was still following me on the car. Then I saw an empty barren, surrounded by concrete walls and a strong bar gate, except there was enough space under the gate to crawl in. So I literally threw the backpack and then crawled under. There was a huge electric control box, and I opened it to crouch inside and hide. My aunt's still on the phone. She, my other aunt, and my uncle were all on a call with each other, putting credit on my phone and asking for my live location through WhatsApp, because I had no idea where I was. Literally in the middle of nowhere. I waited there for like 2 hours, and this guy would not leave. I even had to go pee outside the box, and immediately ran back inside. There were even tiny spiders and old honeycombs, so I was also fighting both my arachnophobia and trypophobia. At some point, I'm guessing the guy left and my uncle got there in his truck. He didn't know where I was, so he kept honking and telling me to tell him when the noise was getting louder and closer. And then I finally got out. For a while I thought maybe this had been a misunderstanding and I just jumped out of the guy's car like a maniac without even paying him. But then I got home after staying in my aunt's pharmacy for a while until my mom, who didn't know much about what happened, picked me up. I checked the Uber app and not only did it say I had already paid, but it also said I made it to my destination, so I rolled that out. I had told my aunts not to tell Mom about it because she goes insane at the minor inconvenience. I had to Indiana Jones that shit twice, and to this day my family brags about how I was able to keep myself perfectly composed and react quickly, which I'm still shocked about. I remember seeing broken glass and metal bars laying around and telling my aunt, if I'm going down, I'm taking him with me, in a joking manner because her blood sugar levels were screwing her over. This entire situation could have gone horribly wrong. My parents believed this guy was a rookie who maybe felt sorry for me and let me go, because if he had wanted to, he could have hurt me with some sort of weapon or just tried to kill me right then and there. I don't even know anymore. I sent his profile to all the girls I know so that if they ever happen to get him as their Uber driver, they can cancel. Since then, I don't take Ubers anymore. Wherever this guy is right now, I don't want to ever meet again. I work in food service, front of house, so in the early days of the pandemic with restaurants closed, I was taking work wherever I could find it. An old friend clued me into a medical office that needed someone to come in and do a bit of light filing. I was able to go in at night to limit direct contact with people, so I jumped at the opportunity right away. Ironically, the medical office job had been the safest job I've been offered this far, COVID-wise. I wanted to avoid the bus if I could, due to crowds, so decided to swing for a rideshare app. It's not all that expensive in my area, and I really didn't want a virus. I headed in at almost 3 a.m. because it was after the cleaning crew had left. I was kicking myself for being so cautious, though because I was exhausted. I stumbled onto the block looking for my ride, and to my tired self's great relief, the car spotted me almost immediately and pulled up asking, "Uber?" while I cluelessly wandered up and down the street searching. The ride was taking a while, but I'd only just moved here last year, so I'm not familiar with all the surrounding areas, and thought nothing of it. I was pretty alert at first, so was trying to pass the time playing games on my phone and stuff. But the car didn't have a compatible phone charger, and I wasn't sure the building would have one, so I wanted to save my battery to be able to call a ride back. I shut my phone down into airplane mode and eventually drifted off from a combination of tiredness and boredom. I don't often take rideshare, so being alone with a strange driver often put me a bit on edge, but this guy had a pretty boring car and a very standard look about him. He looked like my brother even. Young, clean-kept, listening to jazz, nothing that screamed, "You need to micromanage this trip." When we arrived, the driver tried to wake me up by calling to me from the front, but I was in too deep of sleep and couldn't fully distinguish it from my dream. Finally, he awkwardly jimmied my leg to wake me up and kept saying, Ma'am, we're here now." I was embarrassed that I'd been out of it, so I just gave him a hurried "thanks" and booked it out of the car and into the building. As I looked around, I began to realize nothing was what I had expected of an office park. I had seen a street view of the building when I first looked up the business, and it had appeared to be a strip mall plaza. The further I went, the more loudly alarm bells were ringing in my gut. The structure was semi-dilapidated, and it was pitch black dark past the entryway. I expected some lights to be off in the nighttime, but not the entire building. I skittered across the concrete foundation, compromising what was left of the lobby area. Told myself they just must be renovating, and followed signs for the stairs. After what felt like ages, but was likely just a few minutes, all I had passed was construction equipment, a couple locked doors, and some smashed windows. I was certain I was not going to find a medical office, and figured maybe I had mixed up the address. I took out my phone to double check, but once I got it out of airplane mode, I could barely get a signal. I kept moving around in the building, pacing, looking for a stronger signal. I eventually confirmed in my text that I had written down the correct address just by scrolling back, which didn't require service. Since I had only been inside for a few minutes at most, I figured I should try to get in touch with the driver, because if I entered the correct address, then it was only fair he should continue my ride to the correct place and save me the added fees of calling a second trip, considering this was all a mix-up. The app was taking forever to load with my slow service, but before I could get to a cloud of reception, I heard a rustling sound in the lower level of the building. I was on the top floor, and the only stairwell I was aware of was the one I had taken up, so that would force me into the middle of the building. There was no way to exit the situation without encountering whoever was downstairs. In an abandoned building in the latest hours of the night, I figured the chances were high that it was a tweaker, and I had no desire to try slipping past a tweaker, especially when it was late enough that they were probably on something, so jumpy and on edge. I tried to get a text out to a group of friends with my address and request to call 911 to help me get from this property, because I didn't feel safe walking in that neighborhood at night, and I didn't have enough reception to call a new ride. But the message wasn't sending, my reception was too weak. So I gave up on getting my phone going and started checking for another stairwell, or even window with balconies or dumpsters that could be used to exit from the second floor as a last resort. I scrambled over to a door with a stairs sign on it, but the stairs were completely destroyed and it was essentially just a straight drop down to the first floor. At that point, the worst case scenario began to unfold. I heard whoever was downstairs begin making their way up the stairs. I thought fast and figured based on my walk that the floor was basically a giant loop, so I would have to wait for whoever it was to come up the stairs, wait for them to come all the way up, and then sprint the opposite direction of wherever they were going to try and get down the stairs out of the building in time to make it to the road without encountering them. I was not anticipating being chased or anything, but didn't want to piss off a druggie or have a homeless person who might be living there feel as though I'd trespassed and become hostile towards me. I held my breath for what felt like 5 minutes, but was likely closer to just 30 seconds, and the person appeared at the top of the stairs. To my great relief, it was just the Uber driver. I figured he had come back for me, realizing he had left me in the wrong spot. A place that could have worked out to be dangerous. So I came out from the beam that I was hiding behind, and I started to wave at him. But then I processed. There was no way for him to realize this had been the wrong address. My stomach lurched forward, and my blood chilled to slush. I made eye contact with him, very briefly, and he was completely calm and composed, but breathing very heavily, and blocking the stairwell down. On a normal, rational day as an outside observer, I could think of a dozen innocent reasons he might have returned, but in the moment, standing across from him, I just knew in my gut this was something with ill intent. I can't remember much more from the ensuing few minutes. Operating solely on muscle memory and instinct, I Superman dove for the second stairwell's opening and just let myself fall down the drop. Thankfully, I don't think he'd seen where I'd gone at first, and though I was in too much pain to know it then, plenty was bruised but nothing was broken. I scrambled up and threw myself at anything that seemed like it could be a door. It was too dark to tell. I was disoriented from the fall, and I wasn't in a calm enough mindset to think to use my phone's flashlight. Just before I was able to reach the door, it flew open with a blinding light beaming straight into my eyes. My first thought, though not totally coherent, was, "Oh, there must be another one of these guys here," and I stumbled backwards trying to find something to hide behind. Before I could, a voice called out, "All right, this is the Name-Often Police Department. Everyone get on your knees with your hands in the air." I didn't believe it was the police at first sight. I was in such a fight or flight mode and had already committed to flight that I continued looking for ways to get out. But he kept shining the flashlight right at me, and I teetered around and yelled, "Hey, I said on the ground. Right now. Hands out. Hands out where I can see them." He sounded so authoritative that I just automatically did exactly as he asked. He approached me and finally shined the light away from me. It took a second to get my night vision, but once I did, I could see he was really a police officer. I tried to explain what was happening, but first he started asking me all these questions, and combined with what just happened, and my fear of the driver coming back, it all snowballed into me being unable to form a single sentence. He was even asking easy questions too, like, "Can you tell me your name? Do you have any knives, needles, or anything that could poke or cut me? Would you rather talk in here or outside?" And my total stunned babbling in response at first led him to believe that I was on something. He directed me out of the car, and once I was safely out of the building, I was able to start getting my bearings just a little. I sat on the edge of the back seat of the squad car, with the door open facing out, while he stood across from me, and he was asking the same questions again and again. The first thing that I could think to ask was, "Did my friends call you? What did they tell you?" And he explained, no, nobody called him. He was patrolling the area and noticed a car idling outside of this building that's known to be condemned, and nobody's supposed to be inside. And when they are, they're up to no good. He was launching into a speech about how if I'd gone to shoot up or meet a John, he had resources he could direct me to, and that this was not the ideal place to do either of those kind of things, and it's a very unsafe place at night. Finally it all clicked. The car. I spilled my whole rideshare story in a frantic word vomit. He looked around, and the car wasn't there anymore. The officer guessed the guy had driven off while we were talking inside the building. He asked me all the details I remembered, and I told him. But there weren't that many. I'd been too tired when the ride started to track much, but the officer realized I could pull up my Uber app and get all the information. There wasn't really enough reception there, even outdoors, so we sped down the road once I had enough bars, and the app roared to life, and I had 4 missed notifications from Uber that said, "Hello, I arrived," and "I don't see you, can you confirm the pickup address is correct?" and "I am flashing my hazards," and finally, "Unfortunately, your driver had to cancel." At first I thought the driver was so cunning as to pick me up while sending these fake messages, and canceling so the GPS wouldn't track us, knowing I wouldn't notice because I was asleep with my phone off and exonerating myself. But instead I checked the car details. I checked it again, and it definitely was not the same driver. The person who'd driven me there had not been my Uber. My driver was somewhere else on the street when this guy pulled up to me. The policeman took my statement and said that they would keep an eye out for the guy, but the best I could give them to go off of was basically young-looking Caucasian man with brown hair, sideburns, goatee, and a 4-door sedan, wearing a zip-up sweatshirt, maybe a hoodie, which is like 1 out of every 4 guys in this city. I feel so blessed to have survived this near miss. I think it's safe to say that I will not be taking any rideshare services anymore. Quadruple check your license plate and driver name. You just never know.